Hi everyone, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri 1917 Diary series, and I skipped yesterday, so apologies for that. It was just, one of those days where it just didn't work out. I was teaching and there was all kind of commotion going on here at the house. There's a bit of commotion at the moment just beyond the fence, which you can't see, children playing, and that's great. It's a happy sound, but this is my second attempt because the first time I tried it, they decided that they were all going to scream in unison, like 4 or 5 kids. So, yeah, I decided better start over. So anyway, if they do that midway through the video, then, for God's sake, then I'm just going to keep going. Okay. Suppose I could go yell at them, but I don't want to be that guy, really. Okay, so to recap, our topic in the last video was Kerensky, Alexander Kerensky, who at the time of Dmitri writing was the prime minister of Russia, but having a very rough time and just barely hanging on to power. And so today we're going to talk about one of the things, or rather Dmitri's going to talk about one of the things that weakened Kerensky, and that was an uprising by a general named Lavr Kornilov. So I will turn it over to him. This is the 16th of September, 1917. That date is in the old style, so it would have been later in September on the Western calendar, and it's a Saturday. And here we go. There was the Kornilov uprising. If you believe the official sources, it has been suppressed! Exclamation point. I just want to say a few words about that, namely that General Kornilov's action was entirely typical of the current situation in Russia. Kornilov is that man who, seeing that the army was disintegrating, that things were still worse in the rear, decided to advance from words to action. His program for reorganization of the army and the raising of discipline within it met with support at the Moscow State Conference and among the government, but when it came down to actually implementing the program, Kerensky couldn't make up his mind to it. Consequently, it was only in words, and nobody could bring it to action. Then Kornilov himself, risking his own skin, decided to advance from words to action, and he failed. It seems to me, though of course I could be mistaken, that there was nothing counter-revolutionary in the movement launched by Kornilov and his confederates. He is simply a man who heeded the howls of that self-same provisional government and recognized that the homeland was in peril, and decided to act in the sincere belief that his uprising could save the homeland. Yes, the Kornilov phenomenon is very typical. It's just surprising that only one such general has emerged. Let me say again that according to the newspapers and wire service, the Kornilov movement has been definitively suppressed. But I firmly believe that that is not the case. It seems to me that everything is at a boil in Russia right now, especially in Petrograd. I am even inclined to think that the provisional government has declared the Russian Republic precisely because it cannot guarantee that there will be another chance to take that action. And the fact that we now have a republic gives the government a certain formal standing, whereas its task until now has merely been to move the country towards a constituent assembly. Recently, in Reuters and in the Russian newspapers, there have been reports that confirm my assumption that things have not at all calmed down in the wake of the Kornilov movement. These reports concern the release of General Kaledin, Ataman of the Don Host, and the cessation of all harassment of the Cossacks in Moscow and Petrograd. Clearly, the provisional government is afraid of pushing the Cossacks too far, since their mood is quite oppositional, and therefore one can expect, in the case of excessive rigor, that the Cossacks will push back. So there you go. There's some text from our friend who is supposedly a dimwit, or at least doesn't care about his country at all. quite impressive, I think. And in fact, if you're doing broader research on Russian history of this time period, then, beyond interest in Dmitri, this could be of interest, him representing a person who's very well informed, commenting on what was going on from abroad, granted. So yeah, and he is very well informed. We find out that he's using the wire service and also the Russian newspapers. They probably weren't getting the Russian newspapers at the British legation, but he was getting them, and that he was well aware of things like this conference in Moscow. So his news on the Kornilov uprising itself seems a little hazier. Maybe, he's using the usual sources, but he's a little distrustful, and that's always wise, to not simply take things as gospel. So anyway, let's talk about Kornilov and his uprising. Well, to begin with, the uprising occurred from the 28th to the 31st of August, when Dmitri says that it's typical of the current situation. He means that nothing is settled. Nothing is settled, and it's been this way for quite a while now. Nobody knows when they go to sleep at night what's going to happen the next day. So yes, it's very typical of that. So let's talk about Kornilov himself. General Lavr Kornilov, he was 46 years old, and after the revolution, he was, a successful general before the revolution. After the revolution, he was appointed commander-in-chief, supreme commander of the army by the provisional government. Prior to that, he had been in intelligence. Before the revolution, he had been an officer involved in the intelligence service. He was a career military man. His mother was indigenous to Central Asia, or I think more Siberia. So if you see photos of him, you can definitely see that, he came from one of those indigenous populations, although his father was Russian, and that was not untypical in Russia, that people from Central Asia and from Siberia, from the indigenous peoples there, were integrated into Russian, life, and there weren't really barriers against that. It was very much a multi-ethnic empire, as empires tend to be. All right, so what was the background between Kerensky and Kornilov? Well, this puts Dmitri and other people of the same mindset in a bit of a difficult situation. Who do we root for, so to speak? Because they were on the same team, Kerensky and Kornilov. They both had important posts very important posts in the provisional government, and they were both concerned about the same problem, which was what was going on in the army, because both of them wanted the war to continue. Neither of them wanted to withdraw from the alliance. They wanted the war to continue, but by that point it was very, very unpopular. So it was falling apart, because we talked before about the idea of Soviets. So the Soviet Union was, or would be, a union of the Soviets. And the Soviets are, the word means councils, but they're groups of people. You had soldiers Soviets, you had workers Soviets, and they would come together in some localities, like most cities had a Soviet. There was the Petrograd Soviet, the Moscow Soviet, and so all of these Soviets, amongst the most powerful were the soldiers' Soviets, and the soldiers were saying everybody has to remove their shoulder boards, their insignia of rank, and decisions by commanders had to be approved by the soldiers' Soviets. And so even for people who were pro-revolution, to try and maintain order in that situation was very difficult. So the army was falling apart. You can't run an army on that basis. You had soldiers deserting left and right. You had soldiers killing officers who were non-compliant. And Kerensky and Kornilov both saw very clearly that had to be dealt with. But in this instance, so Dmitri's assessment of both men, as we heard about Kerensky in the previous diary entry, was that he admired them both as men of action. But in this instance, it's Kornilov. Kerensky, of course, was in charge of the whole country, and Kornilov could focus on the military, and Kerensky wasn't doing anything about the situation in the military because Kerensky was very much pinned down by the Soviets, and so Kornilov was the man who decided to advance from words to action, as Dmitri puts it, and lead a body of troops marching toward Petrograd. And so you could say that the intention was that it would be a military coup, but there's some confusion around that about what the motivation was. And so some scholars say, well, it was mainly a matter of misunderstanding, that Kornilov thought that the Bolsheviks had taken over in Petrograd, and so he was coming to the relief of Petrograd, whereas Kerensky, well, I mean, this is definite, Kerensky sent him a telegram while he was on the march saying, no, you're dismissed from your post, and you're not to come to Petrograd. And so some scholars say that Kornilov actually misinterpreted that to be definitive proof that the Bolsheviks had taken over Petrograd and had gotten Kerensky to send that. So yeah, anyway, as I say, it was hard for someone like Dmitri to say, I'm definitively for Kornilov or I'm definitively for Kerensky. They both supported the provisional government. So Dmitri's saying that the Kornilov movement has been called a counter-revolutionary action, but that he doesn't believe that's the case. So by this point, Kornilov had actually been arrested, I believe. He would end up killing himself in prison, or maybe he wasn't in prison at that time. It's all very muddled. I could have done a better job sorting it out. Anyway, that is the situation that Dmitri is talking about. And, what to do about this? Well, he's doubtful that the whole thing is over. He expresses doubt here, as you heard, and wondering if the newspapers are correct. And certainly, he does not believe, as he writes, that things have calmed down in the wake of the Kornilov movement, even if it's true, as he does believe, I think, that the movement was a failure. Even if it's true, things have not calmed down at all. And one of the things, one of these reports, he says, talks about the release of General Kaledin, who was the ataman of the Don host. Probably, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the Don host was the biggest Cossack host. They were called hosts. And General Kaledin was, why didn't I look him up? But he was the ataman, so the leader of this huge, impressive body, the Don Cossacks. And apparently he had been imprisoned and now had been released because, well, I mean, what was the thing about the Cossacks? Well, very early in Russian history, the Cossacks had been sort of dissenters. They had been sort of not religious dissenters, but people that wanted space. They wanted to be out from under the thumb of a centralized government. So they were basically not an ethnic group, but a group, but various Russians who were unhappy, as I say, with the control of a central government. So they went out to the Ukraine, to the frontier. You know, the Ukraine is, beyond the border. That's sort of what the word means. It's the frontier. So they'd gone there, and they were mostly peasants, and they'd taken up farming, but they they had this kind of odd status where they were both farmers and soldiers. Every man was obliged to be in readiness, to have a position within the host and be in readiness to fight at any time. And that at that time, they were considered anti-government, and they would, they were this uncontrollable element that the government had to be very wary of. And there was a big Cossack attempt at a takeover called, Stanko Razin was the leader, but I'm going way down the rabbit hole with this. At some point, all of that turned around. So by the time Nicholas and his father and his grandfather and Nicholas I, the Cossacks were very, very loyal to the crown. And in fact, they were considered reactionary. So, so this was, this was the provisional government with its back against the wall because of the Bolsheviks saying, okay, we need their help. So if this report was true, then, Dmitri's saying, then, yeah, that's very interesting that they've released Kaledin and they are looking for the help and the support of the Cossacks. All right, so he's just basically having to shrug his shoulders and say, what next? And we have the same question. What next for us? Well, a very interesting continuation of this text, not about Kornilov, but about the Russian people, what they need and what they are capable of. So we will have the assessment of a forward-looking, a modernist Grand Duke, providing his assessment of what the Russian people are like in various capacities, as soldiers, as members of the body politic. So yeah, come back for that, and I will see you then. Bye.